What's up, everybody, and welcome into Talking College Football. I am your host, Phillip Jordan from Last Word on College Football and 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I am the in-studio host and producer, Dothan Woods Football. Welcome into the show. Kind of took a podcast vacation a little bit there last 2 weeks to kind of get ready as the ramp up for football season. College football season, pro football season, the high school football season. I'm going to have you covered. But here on Talking College Football, all year long, we talk nothing but the beautiful, chaotic sport that is college football. It's been chaotic lately. The last couple of weeks, I've missed a lot. I haven't been behind the microphone able to talk about some things, but we will discuss them here on Talking College Football. I'm going to be joined by Barry McKnight, the voice of the Troy Trojans. You can also check them out on 740 in Montgomery every day, Monday through Friday in the morning. They talk about all the biggest stuff going on in the sports world, and I know they've been talking a lot about what's been going on with college football here in the last couple of weeks. Before we give my thoughts on what I've missed the last few weeks, plus my conversation with Barry McKnight, we're going to tell you where I can find me in the podcast. Find me on social media at PJordanSEC. That's still the same because, look, we may have expanded in all of college football, but we don't know where roots are at. That's in the SEC. So PJordanSEC is where you can find me on Twitter. The podcast is on Twitter at Talking CFB Pod. Got used to saying that. You've been so used to saying Talking SEC Pod, but no, it's Talking CFB Pod. That's you can find it over on Twitter. And if you're a subscriber to Talking SEC, just it changed to Talking SEC, Talking College Football. Very easy to find. We're on YouTube, on the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel, and also on the Talking College Football YouTube channel, which again, the changeover from Talking SEC. You can always email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. Now, let's talk about what I've missed. So, what have I missed over the last couple of weeks since I have not been podcasting at all? No college football stuff, no NFL stuff, no high school football stuff. I just took a break the last couple of weeks. And, of course, college football landscape changed and why I was on that break. We talked a lot about NIL and transfer portal stuff the last year and a lot, how that has changed the college landscape of athletics. Well, I think we really got something that shook it to its core a few weeks ago with realignment. Of course, all this started last year. Well, realignment's been going on for the last 20, 30, 40. The history of college football is all about realignment. This is not a new thing in college athletics. I mean, we've had teams moving all over the place before, but what we've experienced last year after SEC Media Days and now this year going into the Media Days for the conferences, really I think is a seismic shift in college athletics. And college football, and we're going to keep it college football here, but college sports in general, but just to say college football is not the sport. It is not what we once knew it to be. This sport was regional for so long, and the moves that are being made, or the moves that were made a week and a half ago from this recording, really changed that. The sport is national, it's not regional, and it's just the way the sport's going to look in 5 to 10 years is going to be completely different. And I said this, I believe I said this on my social media, that I believe that college football, we'll just keep in our lane here, will look like the NFL. I believe there's going to be 2 conferences. There'll be the AFC and the NFC, basically, the Big Ten and the SEC. But I think also a big thing here is, and I'm going to give an NFL history lesson for you guys here on the College Football Podcast. Of course, you had the NFL for the longest. That was the league. And then the American Football League come along in the 60s. Late 50s, early 60s. I'm sure I'm getting something wrong years, but I'm just the gist of this you'll understand. They were 2 rivals, like the Big Ten and SEC are. We know the rivalry between the 2 conferences. It is there. They do not like each other. There's not a lot of love lost between the SEC fans and the Big Ten fans, which, of course, I have been known to go at some Big Ten fans on Twitter. It's part of my sarcasm, all in good fun. That's a great conference. The SEC is a great conference. So the AFL and NFL eventually started playing a world championship game, which what we know now today is the Super Bowl. And he played in that one. But eventually, the NFL was just the bigger, more powerful brand. The AFL merged into the NFL, what we now know as the NFL now, the AFC and the NFC. So I'm wondering, when we get to two mega conferences, and I got a lot of little bullet points here I'm going to talk about on this. When we get to the point where there is that scenario, if that is the scenario, I could be completely wrong on this. Will they be working together, or will they be working against each other? And that is a very, very important detail in this. And I don't know which way that's going to go because of their rivals. And also, you got to look at Fox and ESPN with this. That's two rival networks going head to head. Fox wants to beat ESPN, and ESPN wants to stay on top of the sports world and television and not let Fox take over that space. And Fox is the closest one to them with everything they do it. I mean, and this is a big move by Fox and the Big Ten going getting USC and UCLA. You're in the LA market now. That is huge. I guess you can say they're in the New York market with Rutgers, but not really. I mean, no one in New York. Let's be fair. People in New York, do they really care about college football? They may care about college basketball, the old Big East fans. But college football, they don't really care, I don't think, in the New York, New Jersey area. But in LA, they do. They do when it comes to the USC Trojans, UCLA coming along with them. So that is a huge move. And, of course, last year, Texas and Oklahoma coming into the SEC. But with the Big Ten, this is different. Because when you look at Oklahoma and Texas, yeah, they're more southwest, but you can still sell it that we're still the SEC. We're the Southeastern Conference. That kind of fits, the geographics. When you look at USC and UCLA, that's different. That's two West Coast teams coming to play in a conference that traditionally is a Midwestern conference. So now that makes the Big Ten national. Now, the SEC is a national brand. We know that. But now the Big Ten is a national brand. They are national. And where are they going to go next? Of course, when all this happened, you had the Oregon and Washington conversation. Would they go next with them? Of course, the Notre Dame part of it. What's Notre Dame going to do? Will they join a conference? Of course, they got 1 foot in, 1 foot out with the ACC. They're into ACC and everything else. They play 5 or 6 ACC games a year in football, but they're not in a conference. They joined the ACC for 1 year in 2020 to help them out, to help Notre Dame out, and that during the COVID year. But they are independent. Do they want to keep that independence? They make the most sense in the Big Ten, but also, would they turn down the SEC? I haven't seen anybody really of substance put out SEC Notre Dame. It seems like Big Ten Notre Dame, of course, ACC Notre Dame. And honestly, if Notre Dame goes to the ACC as a full-time member in football, then that does change things, from my opinion, on the two conferences, because then you have that brand name in Notre Dame along with the ACC. You've got Clemson. Hopefully, Miami is going to come on the rise once again with Mario Cristobal. I like what he's able to do as a recruiter. He's a good coach. We'll see if he can turn that program around and get them back to where Miami once was. If Florida State can get right again, you got good programs. Pitt, that's another good program right now with football. Wake Forest is a good team. You got a good conference. They're not on the level of the Big Ten and the SEC, but you still have a solid league there with the ACC. Then you put in the big name brand of Notre Dame. And then with Notre Dame, their NBC deal, which I believe runs out either 2024 or 2025, do you bring NBC with you? And that's another big thing for the Big Ten. The SEC is ESPN. They're in their final days of the CBS deal. They will fully be an ESPN product. But now, if you're the Big Ten, if you can get Notre Dame and they still keep their NBC contract, and you got Fox and NBC going up against the guy that's been on top of the mountain when it comes to broadcasting with sports and ESPN, that would be big too. So there's a lot of things here. And one of my first tweets when I saw the news about USC and UCLA was the fact is that Kevin Warren is savage, because this time last year, talking about the alliance between the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and then we see what happens, right? They go out and they stab the Pac-12 in the back. Big Ten gets there too. I would say their two most important universities in that conference because, once again, we're going to tie that back to the LA market. Now, you kind of look at this deal. What happens to the Pac-12? My opinion, I think the Pac-12 is done. I do not see Oregon and Washington staying in the long run. I think they'll eventually get out of there. They will join another conference. And then also, if I'm wrong and we go beyond just the two conferences and we maybe have 3 or 4, who's going to be the third conference here? Now, as I said, you have the ACC, and there's rumors and speculation that ESPN may help them buy out, which I don't believe that. Then trying to get out of their media rights deal that they have with the ACC, which runs through 2036. I mean, ACC teams are locked in. But the Big 12 is in a good spot here. If they can get an Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, those teams make sense in the Big 12. And with the teams they have coming in from the AAC, of course, Oklahoma, Texas will be going into the SEC. You're a 16-team conference then. I mean, the Big 12 is going to be different every year for the next couple of years. It's really hard to really figure out what they're going to be. And then, we'll go back to the ACC. What teams, if the SEC went after teams, it seems like the SEC to me wants to stay in that Southeast footprint. Florida State, Clemson, maybe Miami, Georgia Tech, they make sense, those teams, but who knows what the SEC will do. Now, the one team in the SEC still that makes no sense is Missouri. I'm sorry if you're a fan of Missouri watching this, but that just has never made much sense to me. Missouri just has never been a fit in the SEC. We've seen North Carolina's name mentioned, Big Ten, SEC, stay in ACC. So it's going to be interesting. I think there's a battle there. We talk about the battle, Big Ten, SEC. I also am intrigued with the battle, who is third. The Pac-12 is out of it. They have no shot at this. I think the Pac-12 is done. It's over with as a big player in college athletics. That's just my opinion. But I believe the Big 12 and ACC will be two conferences fighting who's number 3. I do not think either one of them has any really chance to jump over to Big 10 or SEC because one of those two conferences are not done adding teams. But now you could see one of these two, and the Big 12 can add more. The ACC may be kind of stuck where they are at right now. So if it stays like that, I like the Big 12, what they're doing. And I think that really if you added Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah, which would be funny for Colorado because they left the conference to go to the Pac-12. So then if they went back to Big 12, that'd be quite interesting as well. So that would be a fun conference. And then there was a story out too about an ACC Pac-12 partnership or some kind of arrangement between the two. That will probably be the Pac-12's only chance of survival is to either partner with the ACC or the Big 12. But by itself, I just don't see it having much legs to stand on as a conference because you just lost your biggest media market with USC and UCLA. And I'm still going to say this. I've said this probably about 2 or 3 times in this opening monologue that I do believe that Oregon and Washington, I don't know anything. I don't have any sources. It's just kind of where I'm looking at things. You read stuff. You kind of see where trends are going. Those are 2 good brands, and you want to get in on one of these conferences because you don't want to be left outside of this. And I believe those 2 programs at some point, who knows when it will happen, but they will lead the Pac-12 in my opinion. But and it's all, I'm going to circle us back. This is, yes, it's SEC Big 10 making some big moves these last 2 off seasons, but it's also Fox and ESPN trying to have the better product. This is all about TV. What's the better TV product? And those 2 were going at it, and it's the Big 10 and the SEC along with Fox and ESPN. Something else I missed while I was on break, and this happened really close to after I went on my little break too as well. Arch Manning to Texas. Now, I came close to just popping on YouTube and give my quick thoughts on this. And I won't go as long on this as I did the realignment stuff. But Arch Manning to Texas. I'm not shocked. And honestly, if you want to look at from just a branding move, this was big for Arch Manning to go to Texas. Because Texas, we all want Texas to be back. Everybody wants that. I think they do. Even if you say, if you're watching this or listening to this, you say, I cannot stand Texas. I hope they stay down. No, you don't. Texas is a big name brand. We love our big name brands, especially in this country. We do. Everybody wants to see Dallas Cowboys be successful. Everybody wants to root against the New York Yankees. There's just certain brands we want to be successful. And I think we want Texas. That's why whenever Texas shows us any glimpse of being really good again, I think that is why that Texas is back thing pops up. And yes, they've had a year or there that was really good, but they're not consistent. They're not back. They have not been a national contender in a very, very long time. And then last season, and I had my doubts about Steve Sarkisian at Texas. I really did, because I just did not think he was the guy that you wanted to turn it around. But he had a big recruiting win. And before we talk about that, actually, let me backtrack for a second here. Texas went 5-7 last year. They started 4-1, lost 6 in a row, then they ended the year with a win over Kansas State. That's not a good first year for Steve Sarkisian. But then he gets Arch Manning. And that's also a relationship thing, too. I believe from the time when Sark was at Alabama, Alabama obviously was one of the teams in the running for Arch Manning. So that relationship also mattered. But I also believe this is a smart move by Arch Manning. He's already going to have a lot of pressure on him because he is the grandson of Archie Manning, the nephew of Eli and Peyton Manning. He is going to have so much pressure put on his shoulders to be really good because what his uncles did. Both won 2 Super Bowls. 2 of the best college quarterbacks we've ever seen. Success, success, success. Everything those 2 brothers and their dad have touched has been gold just about. Archie's NFL career was not, but everything else has been pretty good. But now you don't go to Alabama or Georgia, which made sense because Georgia's loaded at position, and so is Alabama now. And also you go there, you're going to places that are already established. If Arch Manning goes to Alabama or Georgia and he wins, he wins a Heisman, he wins a national championship. That's like, okay, we've had other guys do this. Stetson Bennett just won one for Georgia. Alabama's had multiple guys. You're just part of the machine, basically, of those 2 programs. But you look at Texas, as I said, they have wanted to be back, and I think college football fans, college football media has wanted Texas to be back too, because if Texas is big, that's just big for the sport. Once again, I'm going to say it's just good for the sport. We don't have to have Texas being good for it. College football to be big. College football is big anyways, but it becomes bigger if Texas is good, in my opinion. But now you go to Texas, and if Texas gets really good, and let's just say this, I'm not saying they are going to do this, but let's just say if they become national contenders or they win a national title, or just make the playoff with him there, then you can say Arch Manning brought Texas back. Now, Sark is going to get a lot of the credit because he got the recruit to come in. And what also this does, and this was big just getting Arch Manning, now other recruits are going to want to come to Texas because they're going to want to be partnered with Arch Manning. Because, while yes, he has not proven it on the college football field yet, his name means a lot. The Mannings, in my opinion, are the first family of quarterbacking in football. Just what that family has done, the longevity those 2 quarterbacks had. I went over their resume briefly. Just everything that brand of a Manning does. Big-time recruits are going to come to Texas. Texas is already doing well in recruiting. Now, Texas has got an interesting quarterback room. Now you've got Quinn Ewers and Hudson Card. Hudson Card started last year. He got benched. He struggled. And he got benched after the Arkansas defeat. Quinn Ewers, he reclassified. He went to Ohio State, where I had 2 snaps at Ohio State. He transfers to Texas. Now, he's used up his transfer. So, he does not have a free transfer. If he transfers again, he has to sit out a year. Now, of course, Arch Manning will not officially be – it'll be 2023 season when he's there. So, I'm expecting Quinn Ewers to be the starting quarterback for Texas this season. But 2023, what happens? Will they say, okay, he'll be the quarterback then, and then in 2024, Arch Manning will be the quarterback? Or will we see Arch Manning take over 2023? The 2023 quarterback battle at Texas is going to be very intriguing with the Quinn Ewers part of this and now Arch Manning being there. And I want to say this too as well. I do not think Texas will be bad. I think they'll be an 8-9 win team this upcoming season. I think Sarkisian will have that thing better. And Sarkisian's a good coach. He was not bad at USC and Washington. Just his off the field situation at USC is what led to that dismissal there. But with Texas, but let's just put a hypothetical out there, and I would really love to hear your thoughts on this. If Texas struggles in 2022, maybe a 6-6 year, or maybe another 5-7 year. I don't think that happens, but just what if that does happen? Well, Texas say, look, we've had back-to-back losing seasons. Should we get rid of Sark and bring somebody else in? But then you run the risk and a possibility of Arch Manning saying, okay, if you fire him after this year, I'm just going to go somewhere else. You don't want that. And then at the same time, you don't want to be firing coaches left and right either. So you know there's some positivity coming with the program. Once again, I don't think Texas is going to be bad. I think they win 8 or 9 games this upcoming year. But if it went the other direction, would Texas pull the trigger on Sark or say, no, we can't? He's got Arch Manning coming. Good days are in front of us. We just have to ride this out. And once again, you just can't keep recycling through coaches. And you do need to have some consistency in your program when you do make that jump to the SEC. And so that's very important for Texas. So it's going to be very interesting, but I'll be interested. What are your thoughts on Arch Manning to Texas and the future of Texas and Steve Sarkisian and pretty much everything going around with Texas football? Well, that's it for the open. Now I am going to play my conversation. We actually recorded this last Wednesday. Luckily, nothing in college football really went down big to really kind of mess up our conversation, but I'm joined by Barry McKnight, voice of the Troy Trojans. We do this about once a year. We talked about the Troy Trojans coming up this year, new head coach John Sumrall, who coming over from assistant at Kentucky. And we also get into the realignment talk as well on our conversation. Really, really fun, about a 30-minute conversation with Barry McKnight. I think you will enjoy it. Everybody joining me as he does every time this year. So tradition like no other. I am joined by the voice of the Troy Trojans, Barry McKnight. And you can also check him on Sports Radio 740 in Montgomery every morning, Monday through Friday, which I'm sure has had absolutely nothing to talk about in the last few weeks when it pertains to college football. But as always, Barry, I appreciate the time, and thank you for joining on the show.
It's always good this time of year when the calendar rolls around. I know, a lot of people look at the start of college football being, when the players begin fall camp or when, the preseason magazines come in. For me, I know anytime I'm on with you, I know it's just around the corner. That's kind of circles my calendar to get started with college football, no doubt.
With everything going around too, it's like this time of year leading in before you get to the media days for, all the conferences do that. It's kind of like that. May and June and first part of July used to be quiet time in college football.
Yeah.
It's not that way now.
The college football, everything about it is changed. My calendar always was in the sports talk show business. My calendar in the state of Alabama was, football until the end of January. Then you had February, you had recruiting would wrap up. And then, Final Four, the March Madness would be right after that. And we'd talk about that. And then summer would be, waiting around basically until SEC media days. Now it's all the time, particularly the last couple of years, Phillip, when, last year, Texas and Oklahoma just blew up the summertime, which is usually a quiet time in the sports talk business in Alabama. This year it's USC and UCLA. It feels like everything about college football is so much different than it used to be with the NIL and with the transfer portal, and now with more gonzo realignment that there really is no off season for any of this. There's always some college football content out there. The recruiting, the calendar has changed. Nothing feels like it did 8, 10, 12, 15 years ago. Everything feels different.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in February signing day, that actually doesn't feel like it
Mhm.
used to because of the early signing period. Now, when February comes around, sometimes you're like, oh yeah, that's the traditional signing day is not as
Right.
big of a deal as it used to be because most of the big names players, a lot of them do sign in December.
And there's the ones who end up signing in February are either the ones who have had a hard time making a decision, or guys who had thought they were going to have an offer in December, and for whatever reason that offer is rescinded, or it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. So normally February, the first Wednesday in February was always the be all end all. This is it. Now it's more or less like the people at the end of a parade with the push brooms, just kind of cleaning things up afterwards and making sure that it's all over with.
Yeah, let's wrap it up now. We'll start looking forward to the next recruiting cycle that's coming in, or now transfer portal. Who can
Right.
I get from the transfer portal if I didn't get my needs in in my signing class? And it's crazy now. That's now there's no turnoff point.
Well, there's been a lot of transfer portal stuff happening during the summer. You have to declare for the transfer portal
Mhm.
by the 1st of June. Well, here it is in July. Troy has really, really done a lot of recruiting, a lot of there's been a lot of movement since the 1st of June. Transfer portal guys in late. Troy has had a lot of junior college guys commit, junior college linemen especially commit just over the last couple or 3 weeks or so. So it seems as though you mentioned the next recruiting cycle. It seems like it's all one big recruiting cycle, and it goes
Mhm.
on all the time. When does one recruiting cycle end truly and the other one begin? Because I mean, you can sign as you can transfer anytime you want to, but you have to transfer by a certain date in order to be eligible for the fall season. You have to announce your intentions to transfer by a certain period of time. But other than that, anything goes in terms of the calendar. It's a new world.
Yeah, it is. And we got toward the end of our conversation. We were going to get into some realignment conversation. I know you've probably had on the radio, but I do
Mhm.
want to talk about the Troy Trojans. And obviously, I know there's one more date left, but the Trojan tour, that's had
Mhm.
to be a cool thing. One, the Troy fans are getting to meet new head coach John Sumrall, and I'm sure that's been cool for him as well. Just what's been the big takeaway with the Trojan tour this year, which is
It just
great
just
every
the
year.
the energy of it has been astounding. The energy of it since he was announced in December as the head coach has been terrific. Just his exuberance, to use a big word. The staff that he has amassed has got a couple of things that seem to be commonalities. Number one, they're all young. The offensive coordinator, Joe Craddock, is about 36 years old. The defensive coordinator is not over 40. Coach Summerall just turned 40 this week. So it's a youthful staff that relates really well to the players. And the other thing is the energy. Everybody brings energy. Spring practice was incredible in terms of the activity. Not that the previous staff was not, but this staff, it's remarkable. And for Coach Summerall, he has been, it seems like, everywhere and talked to everybody and answered every question and has spread the gospel without ceasing. It's been the energy to me that has been the most important part. The recruiting energy has been really good. The energy with the fan base and the Trojan tours and upcoming, some of the other events, the drawdown, the fan appreciation day, things like that. I guarantee you, any of the fans who are watching and listening to you and me who haven't had a chance to meet John Sumrall yet, it's not for a lack of trying. He has been absolutely everywhere. That to me, once the football gets started, we'll see what kind of a team there is. We'll see what kind of a coaching, what kind of a coaching stamp he puts on this team. But so far, the energy and the excitement has been a revelation.
Yeah, it seems like every time I turn around, he's either doing a radio appearance, a TV appearance, going on a thing, something like this as well.
Right.
Really going out there and putting that message out there. And I have seen, it just seems like the Troy fan base, they are energized. I mean, they are very excited for the upcoming season. I know the last 3 years, after Neil Brown, couldn't get past 5 wins, couldn't get to the bowl game, couldn't get that 6th win. So it is really awesome to see, the Troy fan base has got that re-energized going into the season.
Yeah, he's brought a lot of good news too. Like I said, there's been some really compelling transfers that have come in. The recruiting class was really encouraging without a full, recruiting cycle because of when he came in. But there's a lot of new faces. There's a lot of new names. As far as a depth chart so far, I couldn't even venture to guess. I got an idea of what the strengths of this team will be. I think the defense is going to be phenomenal this year. Everybody can run. Everybody's experienced, it feels like. I don't see a weak spot there, led by Carlton Marshall, one of my all-time favorite players in the history of Troy football. Offensively, there's questions in the offensive line. They've been trying to build depth there. The quarterback room has gotten really, really interesting with Gunnar Watson, who's a returning 2-year starter, basically, but also Peter Costelli, a former 4-star transfer from Utah out of California, is in school and is participating in the offseason workouts. Quade Hawkins, who has maybe the best arm out of everybody in the quarterback room, and a true freshman coming in from Brantley named Tucker Kilcrease, a couple of walk-ons. The running back room is terrific. I love Kimani Vidal and DK Billingsley and Jamontez Woods and Charles Strong. Question marks at the wide receiver position, but I think they have addressed some of the needs at wide receiver with some sizable guys, some experienced guys. So, just from the look of things, just from the look of the talent base that they've got to work with, I don't think this is going to be a rebuild by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, I think Troy is really poised to have a breakout year immediately under Coach Sumrall.
Yeah, and I know, whenever I got people I know, I'm down here in Dothan, so obviously we're very close to Troy. Talk about Troy, quarterback. I mean, obviously, sometimes, you wonder about that. And I know, like I said, the offense last year averaged 19.9 points per game against FBS opponents. Gunnar Watson, I feel like with him, it's like, okay, someone else comes in, he gets the job. He kind of had to split time last 2 years with people. With him, but he's been a steady hand, I think, at quarterback for them.
Right.
He's been reliable. He doesn't really turn the ball over. He protects the ball. He's run the offense well. And you talking about, Peter Costelli coming from Utah, dual threat guy. I see, comments from Coach Sumrall. So you're right. It is an interesting quarterback room, and it really looks like you have no wrong guy to go with there with all the guys they have there in that room.
Well, the different skill sets. Gunnar knows what he's doing. He's been so experienced, and you're right. He's been steady. He gets, he gets the concept of taking care of the football. Costelli, couldn't tell you much about him. I haven't seen him play, obviously, but he's a guy who can extend a play, who can make things happen with his feet a little bit more than probably anybody else in the quarterback room. But my big question is really what the offense is going to look like, what Coach Craddock is going to demand. My understanding is that there is going to be a heavy emphasis on the run game. What we have seen over the last several years with pace and tempo, trying to get things going at a high rate of speed, that may not be as much of an emphasis now as much as physicality, getting into the right play, knocking people off the ball, giving a guy like Kimani Vidal chances to make a difference in the run game over and over and over again. So if that's the case, then I'm really not sure who is totally well suited for that approach. I know Gunnar's steady. I know he's a known commodity. Haven't seen Costelli. Some of the young guys, like I've mentioned before, Quade Hawkins, Tucker Kilcrease, don't know much about. So I think the big question for this offensive, for the quarterback position, for the offensive approach, who can get you into the right play, who can avoid coughing the football up, and who can exhibit some leadership. And I think there's several guys who have that particular skill set.
And then if you could run on the left side behind Austin Stidham is usually a good option to do there with him. What really the Troy offensive line outside of center, seniors, a veteran group,
right?
And it's always good because I always look at offensive line as a team within the team. of all the position groups, they need to be a cohesive unit within each other. And when you've got guys that spend that many games together, that's a big thing to have an experienced offensive line at any level of football. And getting that running game, I think that's a big thing for Troy, having that experience up front.
Well, Stidham is a guy, left tackle, first team all conference, and he's been a 3-year starter, and he is, one of the most spectacular student athletes that we've ever had here. He's an academic All-American 2 years in a row. He just doesn't make any mistakes. He doesn't commit penalties. I think he's committed 2 total in the last 2 years. He doesn't make big mental mistakes. He knows. And like you said, he communicates really well. Jake Andrews is a bulldozer at an inside offensive line position. Very experienced guy as well. The first 5 are really, really serviceable, high-quality guys. The question mark had been depth. They weren't sure that the depth behind the starters was what you needed to do what they wanted to do on offense. So they went and got a couple of guys. They especially in the JUCO route, Coach Popovich, the former line coach for the New England Patriots, who coaches the offensive line at Troy. He has a background. He's from California. He has a background in the California JUCOs, and he's hit those hard. So that I'm not down on him by any stretch. I just don't know. I don't know what they're going to be asking from, because they have such an emphasis on depth. They want to run guys in and out. There's numbers. There's going to be plenty of numbers. I just don't know, how the depth chart is going to shake out.
You mentioned the defense on top, and I'll look at this defense. I was doing my research, kind of, think, what this Troy defense is loaded. And we'll talk about the schedule, and this is kind of going to lead me into that first game too with Ole Miss. But like you brought up Carlton Martial, I mean, this was a top 25 defense in college football last year. I don't think a lot of people know that about Troy. I mean, they were one of the best to get to the quarterback, led the Sun Belt in sacks. They averaged 3.2 sacks per game, which was 12th in FBS, 90 tackle for loss, 10th. And, all these stats, I think a lot of people will say, whoa. A lot of people may not know that about Troy's defense last year. And like you said, they bring a lot of guys back. 5 all Sun Belt performers. Yeah. You got Will Chilow in the middle. You got Javon Solomon and Richard Chabot coming off the edge. I feel bad for any quarterback's got to worry about both those guys coming off the edge. TJ Harrison, the secondary, I mean, talented and experienced defense. And, with a guy like Summerall, I'm sure when he got the job, he had to be loving the defense he was inheriting.
Yeah, there's so much talent there. And like I said, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but there's so much speed there. Cholo, as an interior defensive lineman, has been, since he's been on campus, one of the leaders in the Sun Belt Conference in tackles for loss. Despite being an inside guy and a relatively undersized inside guy, he's so quick and understands leverage and angles so well. So he's always in the backfield. Javon Solomon had a tremendous breakout year last year. Him and Gibonor together, what do you do? And plus, there's other guys that are going to factor in. Jamarcus Chapman, a Florida State transfer. You look at Antoine Parker, a guy who's Antonio Showers, a guy who has been really productive when he's been healthy. At linebacker, people talk about Carlton Martial, and he is within legitimate reach of becoming the all-time tackle leader in all of college football history. He's only a little bit more than 100 tackles away from having more tackles than anybody who's ever played the game. So you can understand how that would overshadow a guy like KJ Robertson, who was a terrific, linebacker, one of the surest tacklers in the country. Jaden McDonald, the Iowa transfer, who was really, really going well before he got hurt. TJ Harris, you mentioned him. In the secondary, lots of experience. Tayon Palmer, Reddy Stewart in the cornerback positions. I love the safeties, Del Pettis, Craig Slocum, guys like that. Those are known commodities. Those are guys who have played a lot of football for Troy University, and there's some depth there as well. Everybody can run. Everybody is going to be coming from different angles to the quarterback. There's so much communication and so much experience there. I think this is going to be one of the best defensive units in the country, much less the Sun Belt Conference.
Yeah, and when you got mention those stars, they just open up for for what everybody else can do on defense, because you're going to worry about, the pass rushers. You're going to worry about Carlton Martial or Will Chilo. And then when you're trying to focus on them as an offense, that's just going to open up something else for somebody else, because you may have to double team one of those guys. And, like that. And then when you do, somebody else has an opportunity to make a play.
If you're an offensive coordinator and you're facing Troy, any offensive coordinator, you know this, Phillip, they're looking to say, okay, who do we need to neutralize? Who is the dog on defense? Who do we have to double team, or who do we have to account for every time? Well, everybody's going to talk about Marshall and Cholo and Gibonor and Solomon, but there's other guys as well. I mean, where are they going to come from? I think Solomon and Gibonor, they both run so very well. You can put them all over the field. You can spread them out wide. You can put them, you can put them inside if you need to. You can move them around. Gibonor had a couple of interceptions. He can drop back. It's difficult to find that one guy that you say, this guy's not gonna beat us. Carlton Martial has double-digit tackles. Just about every game he averages a double-digit tackle game per game in his career. So, he's the guy to stop, but he does such a great job. He's so small. He does such a great job of slipping blocks, of finding gaps, and he's so smart that they're almost never in the wrong position defensively. He makes all the defensive calls and things like that. So your point is well taken. Plus, the corners can, and TJ Harris can also blitz as well. So, you never know who to account for in any specific down or any specific distance, because they all can run. They all are experienced, and they don't mind lining them up all over the field in different spots too.
So that leads me into Detroit's schedule, which I want to talk about their opener at Ole Miss. Ole Miss, super talented team. Lane Kiffin's done a great job replenishing the talent with the transfer portal, but they have not played together yet. In college football, the difference between the NFL, as everybody knows, you don't have preseason. That will be the first time that group, and they are bringing in some new offensive linemen, trying to figure stuff out. And for everybody to think, oh no, Phillips calling Ole Miss to get beat in the opener. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that either. But I believe this Troy defense can give this some issues in that opening game, because their experience of being together. And, we don't know who's going to be the Ole Miss quarterback going into that game. I just feel like the Troy defense against that Ole Miss offense that's inexperienced on the offensive line together, I think it is an intriguing matchup. I think Troy can take advantage of some things.
There's some questions there. There's some storylines there. Coach Sumrall used to coach at Ole Miss, and he's got some fond memories of that. That's going to be one of the storylines. And I think it's perceptive to bring up, you don't know who the quarterback's going to be, even though Jackson Dart, the transfer out of USC, they really like him, but he hasn't, he wasn't great during the spring game at quarterback. And the kid Luke Altmaier, who had to come in the bowl game, you remember when Corral got hurt, he looked pretty good, but he's never had the whole offense on his shoulders before. A couple of the running backs, the transfer from TCU, Zach Evans, really talented. He could be a breakout guy, but in game one, you just don't know. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I think there's going to be some matchups that Troy can take advantage of there. Offensively, I love the idea of Troy running the football against Ole Miss and trying to shorten the game. I think Troy, again, the offensive line is going to have a lot on their shoulders against an SEC defensive front, but I think Kimani, I think a guy like Jamontez Woods out of the backfield, Charles Strong maybe in short yardage situations. I think the accent might be on controlling as much as you can the run game, shortening the game, and just giving yourself a chance at the end. And if that's the case, I like the chances.
Yeah, I do. And it's actually interesting, because later in the week, and I did not do this on purpose, but I actually supposed to talk to an Ole Miss writer later on in the week. It worked out the way I asked, and then I looked at the schedule. Oh, that's right. Troy and Ole Miss play each other first week, so it's gonna be fun. I'm looking forward to that matchup. Underrated matchup, I think, for week one. I think people need to pay attention to. But national look on college football. Of course, we talked about the top. Of course, you're on there in Montgomery every Monday morning. I'm sure the last couple of weeks in college football, and I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit, guys. We are recording this on last week on Wednesday. You're listening to this on Monday, so who knows what has happened in realignment between when this was recorded and when it does air. But everything with USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. Obviously, geographic does not count anymore. But it looks like to me the Big Ten wants to be a national brand. At least the SEC is still technically kind of in the Southeast where they're going. It's just college football. I said this. I think I put it on Twitter. It's changed. I think the college football that we knew is gone with the transfer portal and NIL, as you brought earlier, and then just the way it's going to look. And I'm just I feel like there's more coming, and it's intriguing, but it's also at the same time, college football's, is it going to become something we're not familiar with anymore? The tradition is what we love. I'm rambling on with all this stuff, but just
there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to account for with all of that. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to state everything in just one tidy little package because it is not a tidy little package. There's so many things that could happen. I'm glad you brought up, we're taping on Wednesday, release on Monday, because there may be some things happen between now and then. It is that fluid. The winner, I understand why the Big Ten did this. And I understand why USC and UCLA did this, because if you believe what you're reading, it was USC and UCLA that first brought it up to the Big Ten. And I understand why. The Pac-12, their media deal is nowhere near as good as the Big Ten's is, or as good as the Big Ten's is going to be. So it makes sense for them, particularly UCLA, which is in a pretty good bit of athletic debt. The Big Ten gets the Los Angeles market, and believe me, USC, Los Angeles is a Dodgers town, it's a Lakers town, and it's a USC town. So that's a significant thing just in terms of television. I don't think that's the end. I don't think it's, that's like Winston Churchill said, I don't think it's the beginning of the end, but feels more like the end of the beginning. Yeah. There's going to be a lot going on. The winners out of this thing, or the schools that are in a position of power, are Notre Dame. Notre Dame would give the Big Ten two things. Like you said, they're hoping to become a national power where there's a national brand, where there's nobody that's a better national brand than Notre Dame. Plus, it does help geographically speaking. I don't think Notre Dame's long for the ACC. What they really want is not necessarily, the money's not the biggest thing for Notre Dame, although it's big. The biggest thing for them is access to the playoff. If it turns into a 12-team playoff, and the SEC is going to bring 2 or 3, and the Big Ten is going to bring 2 or 3, well, where does that leave Notre Dame? Do they have to go 12-0 every year just to get in the playoff? They don't want that. They want access. So Notre Dame is in a terrific position. This whole thing could swing on about 4 schools: Oregon and Washington. You and I have talked about this. Oregon and Washington, what they decide to do will either make or break the Pac-12. If they leave, it'll break it. If they stay, it won't necessarily make it totally, because the Pac-12 still got other things to do. But they're in a really good position. I do think the Big Ten would want them. The other ones are from the ACC. I think Clemson and Florida State. People talk about them. They're big brands. But I think the biggest brands in the ACC is North Carolina. I mean, they dominate a very populous state that's in the SEC's footprint, if they want to go there, or the Big Ten's footprint. North Carolina has a lot. Clemson has a lot. Miami does not have the national footprint as much, but they're getting there. I think they made a terrific hire with Mario Cristobal. So, those schools are the schools upon which this whole thing will likely swing over the short term. I don't know what happens with the Big 12. If they go after Colorado, Utah, Arizona State, if that makes sense for those schools to come to the Big 12, or if they stay with the Pac-12, but they're not going to stay with the Pac-12 without an assurance that Oregon and Washington are going to stay. There's a bunch of dominoes going on there. But the fans, when you and I were little, the SEC were 10 teams. We knew who the 10 teams were. You identified with them and everything. Now, Missouri and Arkansas, they still don't feel SEC to me. Texas A&M, South Carolina, they still don't feel that way. Texas and Oklahoma, it's going to be a while for me to get used to it. And I know fans feel that way. Plus, it just feels odd, that the league is going to be so big and with so many new teams. But it also feels odd for the fans because every year now, you've got to get used to new guys on your team. Whenever I was growing up, you had some guy that came in as a freshman. You knew that you were going to be able to track his progress unless something terrible happened through his senior year at your school. Nowadays, you have to re-recruit guys all the time. You look at the SEC, and so many guys who were good quality guys last year aren't with your team anymore. They were somebody else's team. And not only that, but they're going to be making more money than some of the assistant coaches who are going to be coaching them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels as though the game is not the game that we all got used to and we all loved several years ago. Is there going to be a quarterback or a wide receiver who's going to, look down his nose at his wide receiver coach because he's making twice as much money as his wide receiver coach is making right now, and that guy's just in college? Is there going to be a quarterback out there who goes to a third SEC team and, all the identification you built up with him is gone? Who will even be in the SEC in 3, 4, or 5 years? Sometimes I know the listeners to our show sometimes feel like it's more like the NFL than what they've been used to. College football's been built on regional rivalries. It just doesn't feel the same. The product on the field, though, is still going to be really, really good, and that's maybe what the saving grace of all of this is going to be.
Yeah, I was about to bring up that point where I think a lot of people are fearful that college football is starting to look like the NFL, which, and I'm not saying that as a slight to NFL. I watch the NFL on Sundays, but, college football fans, college football and NFL have always felt different. Two different products. Saturday and Sunday are just two different things, but now it feels like they're getting closer together. I think some college football fans probably out there are fearful of that.
I think so. I think there are people out there to whom they cannot imagine the day has come when their favorite players for their home school, they don't get as geeked up about thinking about the great players from the past. Take Auburn, for instance. These people who are lining up for Auburn, not only do they not know much about Bo Jackson anymore, but they couldn't tell you a whole lot about his career at Auburn. They maybe know, the Nike ads and things like that. They're not interested at all anymore, it feels like, in the 2004 team under Coach Tuberville that should have played for a national champ. All that stuff. The fans love that stuff. But the players these days, I'm not sure that they get the same joy and fulfillment out of pulling on the navy blue jersey and the white helmet that the fans feel that they should. For them, it's just, this is my opportunity to play where I didn't get a chance to play last week or last year. And my NIL money better be good here. Otherwise, I'm going somewhere else next week. It doesn't feel like it means nearly as much to the players anymore as it does to the fans.
Yeah, that's true. Which, the SEC, it does mean more. So that's still out there.
For the fans, it definitely does. And I'm not saying the players don't want to win. It's just, the identification with their school that the fans hold so near and dear to their heart may not mean as much as it used to for the players.
Yeah, that sounds going that way, which is like, kind of to lean more how NFL players feel about their franchises. It's kind of where it's headed. And I agree with you 100% on that. And Barry, I told you 25. We've gone 30 minutes.
I knew we would, because there's so much to cover, Phillip. No question.
There is. I mean, I think we could probably go on another 2 or 3 hours just on this topic alone. It's just it's all encompassing what's going on in college football right now. But if the listeners and viewers over on YouTube want to check you out and follow you, where can they find you?
Well, on the radio every weekday morning, like you mentioned, it's Sports Radio 740 in Montgomery, 7 to 10. Myself and John Longshore, we've been at it together for 25 years now. We have an app if you want to check us out on your smartphone when you're driving. It's the Sports Radio 740 app, and it's available anywhere. And, of course, the Troy broadcast, we're getting cranked up again really soon. Looking forward to that. There's a lot of different ways to catch the broadcast on our terrestrial radio affiliates. We have an app as well at Troy for all the Troy athletics and everything, and online at TroyTrojans.com.
All right, sounds good. And Barry, appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road.
Yeah, we'll catch up again real soon, me and you, Phillip. Thanks so much for the time.
All right. Thanks to Barry McKnight for coming on this edition of Talking College Football. Always enjoy having Barry on, and we'll probably try not to have that be a whole year before we hear from Barry McKnight on the podcast again. And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. We're getting close to an hour here because I went long there in the open, and we went a good 30 minutes there with Barry McKnight. Be back on Wednesday. We'll be previewing the Ole Miss Rebels on that edition of the show. Jared Redding from Inside the Rebels over at 247 Sports. He'll be joining me as well. We'll have another 30-minute conversation there as well. I really had fun talking to him at the end of last week, previewing the Ole Miss Rebels. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast is on Twitter at Talking CFB Pod. I am going to struggle with that. Bear with me on saying that because I'm going to want to say what the previous Twitter handle was. Remember, you can find a podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your audio podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. And also, you can check it out on YouTube. Please go do so at the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel or the Talking College Football YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on the video. You leave a comment, I will read it as well on a future edition of the podcast. You can always email me at sportstalkphilipjordan@gmail.com. Be back on Wednesday with another edition of the show, and the Pro Football Pod will be back later on in the week as well. We're going to be previewing the NFC East on that one. So go find that. Go check that out as well. But anyways, guys, I hope you have a great start to your week, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.